Just when you thought the plot points coming out of Braves camp couldn't get any more stunning, they effectively said, hold my insert your beverage of choice. After months of prepping him for the role, it won't be Vaughn Grissom that's the opening day shortstop. It won't be Braden Shewmake, who seemingly was making a late push. Orlando Arcia will be Atlanta's starting shortstop to begin the season. And with that, we welcome you to another BPTV. Cory McCartney and Grant McAuley with you. And Grant, let's try and make sense of a decision that has all of Braves country floored.
Well, we'll start with somebody had to play shortstop for the Atlanta Braves on opening day. But as you just laid out, I mean, we spent an entire winter trying to see how this saga was going to play and who was going to walk into camp on that first day with the chance to either win that job or were they going to go outside the organization and make some kind of a move. The latter did not happen. All winter long, we heard about Vaughn Grissom. We saw the work that he was doing. We talked to him. We talked to Ron Washington. We knew Orlando Arcia was going to factor on this roster somehow. The Braden Shewmake thing was, I mean, intriguing, and you can't really rule out a former first-round pick getting a long look in spring training, but none of this really played out the way that people may have expected it to. But I would also say, and I know we're going to get into all the nuance of this, but this is not a move that's set in stone for all 162 games. The Braves can and probably will revisit this at some point. And again, I think Orlando Arcia, with his big league experience, you can understand why maybe they wanted to go the experience route to start with. I am just a little bit surprised that Vaughn Grissom seemingly played well enough not to lose the job. I was surprised when both he and Shewmake were optioned out with about 10 days to go before opening day. I think it's maybe the timing of all of it that is a little bit surprising for me. What was your take on this move? Because it certainly seemed to surprise most people.
Yeah, I think it's the timing, and it's also, to me, it's also the optics, right? It's like when we talked about with the fifth starter and Ian Anderson and Bryce Elder getting optioned. This one, I mean, felt even more unthinkable because the Braves obviously didn't get to the level that the Cubs, or really, I should say, the market allowed things to get with Dansby Swanson. They stay put. They don't shell out bucks for another shortstop. They don't acquire a veteran or get one via trade. So Grissom, obviously, he gets enrolled in Camp Wash in New Orleans. All we hear are glowing returns, and all of a sudden, Grissom plays it short in 3 of the last 11 games. Shewmake gets a longer look with 5 starts. It's hard to discern at what point what happened, because the narrative, it almost seemed to flip this past week plus to get us to a point where I'm not saying it came out of nowhere because it was kind of building, but it almost feels like the end result is just not something that it felt like we had any inclination that they could go to this point. And, certainly you're bringing in Shewmake, so maybe you think, all right, maybe he's going to be the guy and Grissom's going to get some more, everyday playing time in Gwinnett. I just didn't see a situation where both of them were going to be on the outs here. And we're talking about our RC again. To me, it's just the optics of opening day, just like we talked about with fifth starter. There's just so much that goes in to that day and all the plans that you had going into setting everything up to start the season.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up fifth starter, because if you really think about this, it seems like the Braves are going the opposite direction with fifth starter than they are at shortstop, because they are looking at it like, and I get, and every club really should, by and large, look at the best 26 men to open the season with. That, I think, should be the decision maker for most things, or the X factor, if you will. It should be the only factor. But putting that aside, the Braves decided that the more experienced arms, Ian Anderson and Bryce Elder, I mean, Michael Soroka was beset by injury and is just now getting into action, so he's a late arriver at this party. But you sent the 2 most experienced arms down, and they didn't pitch well in spring training. Meanwhile, you got 2 upstarts that have never pitched in the big leagues, in Jared Schuster and Dylan Dodd, who are both high on the prospect list, and a former first-round pick in Schuster. They seemingly have the inside track on being in the rotation when the season starts. And I know things could happen over the next week and a half before opening day, that somebody that's not on this roster could magically appear on this roster, a la Anibal Sanchez, as we've talked about before. But it is kind of crazy to see the stark difference in optioning out the more experienced arms and then optioning out the more, I would say, upside plays at shortstop, particularly with Grissom, because of all of, and I hate to use this word, but all of the narrative that went behind feeling like, okay, yes, he does have to go win this job, but he's going to go out there and do the things he needs to do. And it seemed like, just from the numbers and from the eye tests, and I know that, you and I watching the game is not assessing it the same way that the club does. And I don't think this is just all service time related. I'm just surprised. I just don't feel like Vaughn Grissom did anything to not earn the job or to lose the job, even if Shewmake came in and got an opportunity to get a look, because by all reports, I mean, this is somebody who has impressed the Braves coaching staff, and I'm sure the Braves in general, in spring training, to get himself into this picture. And he always knew Arcia was going to be there if available, but it just never seemed like that the best case scenario was Orlando Arcia winning this job. I just felt like a lot was put into Vaughn Grissom, and a lot of stock was bought in Vaughn Grissom, I think, overall because of how much it was talked about. So it's just intriguing to me to see two different positional battles that we've talked about and talked about and talked about on this show and everywhere else, and they're going two completely different directions. It's go with the one with experience at shortstop, go with maybe the younger upside plays in the rotation. It's just, again, who would have thunk it, I guess. And there's a lot of different things that are going to come out of this, but I feel like, not to talk in circles and circles and circles, they can revisit this. I just didn't expect this to be the first step. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I get that there were defensive concerns with Grissom because among 162 qualified middle infielders last year per StatCast, only 11 produced a lower average mile per hour than Grissom did. So you take away the shift and add in an unsavory UZR that includes his range. And I get that maybe the concerns were heightened there. And I get that there were concerns with Shewmake, who may be a little bit better defensively than Grissom, but he hasn't produced an OPS over 715 past A-ball.
Right.
I just don't get the not addressing it this winter, even in the interim, because that's not a knock on Arcia, who has over 4,200 innings at shortstop, but he has one season in his career in which he hit at or above league average, and that was last year. If you take any of the seasons in which he played more than 68 games, he's never been better than 86 weighted run created plus. So I have the kind of same concerns that I have with the other guys. It's just wrapped up in a veteran package.
Yeah, and Arcia has made, I think, some swing adjustments that has helped him tap into some more power with the Braves. We've seen it on display, but he's not a guy who's got, particularly high on base skills. But again, and we use this with Grissom, and I would say the same thing's true for Arcia. You're not asking him to carry this offense. The offense is in good hands, and if he can bat ninth and avoid hitting into double plays in front of Ronald Acuna Jr. and go make the plays at shortstop, you're going to be, I think, fine enough. I mean, is fine enough good enough for Braves fans when they think about, oh, well, yeah, we lost Dansby Swanson. Maybe we're okay with that. But to your point, they didn't go out and get somebody, even on a one-year deal, that might have made a little bit more sense at shortstop to give Grissom the time to get himself, I guess, acclimated maybe to shortstop again and to really show some things with the bat and with the glove and perhaps with the arm that he needed to before they handed him a full-time job. All of those are perfectly sane conversation points to have. I mean, none of this is really off the page. It's just a little bit surprising. Braden Shewmake, I think you put over into another category because, as you brought up, offensively speaking, that had kind of been the trouble for him. He had a knee injury last year, or we may not even be talking about what Vaughn Grissom did in 2022 because Braden Shewmake might have been the guy that got called up. So all of these things are intertwined. But the fact that Orlando Arcia has played less than 40 innings at shortstop since the 2020 season makes me wonder just a little bit. I mean, is this actually the best option? But as the Braves have looked at this and as they've weighed things out, and again, I don't think this is 100% service time related, they just felt like the guy with more big league experience might be the one to start with. Doesn't mean they're going to finish the season the way that we're starting.
It's a subplot, and it's a small subplot, but Grissom and Shewmake obviously had options. Ari Adrianza did not, and that effectively allows the Braves to keep him to be able, that would have allowed Grissom or Shewmake to make the roster. Then you don't have Adrianza anymore, and his role as Ozzie Albies' backup as he regains strength is a nice to have. But I don't know if that's really enough to sway a decision there at shortstop, especially Grissom again, who you spent so much time priming for this role, and it looks like the plan is going to be for Grissom and Shewmake in Gwinnett, with Grissom getting the brunt of the play there at shortstop. Shewmake could get a lot of time at second base, but I think regardless, it's just a turn none of us saw coming. And again, on the heels of Ian Anderson and Bryce Elder being optioned last week, I'm just waiting to see what the Braves have in store because, they say these kind of things, Grant, they come in threes.
Yeah, they kind of do. And I guess, technically we've had 4 players affected by this that we didn't necessarily see being affected by this when the season started. You knew there's going to be one fifth starter, and we're not having a fifth and sixth starter, conversation and competition. So you felt like it was going to be somebody that was a known quantity coming into camp, with Schuster and Dodd perhaps being that next line of defense at AAA. Then when you looked at shortstop, again, all the discussion about Vaughn Grissom, knowing that you have Arcia, Shewmake was a pleasant surprise. And I hope he's able to continue doing this and gaining some ground in his, kind of reclaiming his prospect status as a former first-round pick himself by getting some regular playing time at Gwinnett. Look, they feel like that glove's going to work. He can play second base. Grissom can get that time at shortstop. And who knows what's going to happen as the season wears out. But it has been really, really interesting to be having these conversations, and 2 very different conversations about the 2 biggest positional battles that you have. But nothing is really settled until, you have to go into the season and things play out. And then your best laid plan may not be available to you because there may be some injury. And to bring up Adrianza, I mean, he's a nice defensive backup. I think we got some clarity on what the outfield's going to look like when you've got Jordan Luplow, and you've got Eli White also being optioned out. So it looks like Sam Hilliard and Kevin Pillar have got the inside track on the outfielder jobs behind Eddie Rosario and Marcell Ozuna, who would likely spend most of his time at DH. So it kind of makes sense for Adrianza to be that, utility knife that you need all around the infield because he can play each one of the spots. I just didn't expect him to necessarily come in and win a job over seeing Vaughn Grissom at least get a chance with Orlando Arcia in reserve, because Arcia can also play second base, shortstop, and third base. And you got, I think, a couple of guys in Travis d'Arnaud and Sean Murphy that could stand at first base for you if you needed to, but obviously that's no part of the plan either. You want Matt Olson out there for every inning that you can. But as we've talked about, and we'll continue to talk about, all of these things are interconnected in different ways, and the Braves are going to make the decisions based on the criteria that they've seen. And again, you can always reassess this stuff as it goes along. And usually, as we saw last year, injury has you reassess things that you never wanted to have to reassess.
Well, who knows what's coming next? So make sure you stay with us here on BPTV, subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell a friend. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you soon, Braves Country.